Hey guys, I'm back with one more episode of Let's Go DC's tutorial on advanced MVVM using Swift, which dealt with a little bit of RxSwift, Rx data sources, Fire, everything. And we are at episode 10 now. But one of the thing which is missing right now, because we did not have many screens to navigate to, is that we don't still have a way of navigating to a different screen with decoupling, with like a decoupling way where we can get rid of all the code within a view controller. So the current way is only to have the data just being populated or a function call is being done on a view model. So that's just moving some bit of code from the view controller to the view model. But as such, if you look at it, navigation is still coupled with the view model because we are directly launching the view using the storyboard. So we have to deal with it, like we have to change it in a way that even the view gets loaded using a navigation layer. That is called coordinators, which we will introduce in this tutorial, which will allow you to completely decouple your navigation flow outside of the view controller. So I will take it through slowly by introducing how we can decouple, let's say, a view. Currently we have just a view controller. I'll introduce some more view controllers and then show you how to completely use starting from the app delegate, how you can achieve it, and then slowly take out a little bit of code from there and then introduce coordinators, which will make more sense. So let's get started. Let's get started by stripping off some of the dependencies in the storyboard right now. So I just have one view controller right now where everything is happening here itself. So instead of this, and one more thing here is the storyboard entry point is right now coupled with this one. So we have to even remove that. So let's say I start by removing this, and if I try to run the application now, ideally nothing should launch because I've totally removed the entry point. So as you can see, it's a blank screen. Nothing gets loaded because there's no entry points there, and you also get that message here because main is supposed to be loading this. So we have stripped that dependency right now, and let's see how we can load it from the app delegate. So this is actually the basics or the first initial step of actually creating a coordinator. So coordinator pattern in MVVM. So let's use the window property of the UI kit. You'll have window then and create an instance there. It'll ask for a frame. So frame is nothing but let's say you have to set the UI screen for the frame. So main dot let's check the, you just need to get the bounds. So that'll load your instances of a new window. Once you have it, then you can do stuff with it like make key and visible. This is something as default you need to do. And now let's create navigation control. And let's set its ease navigation bar hidden to true, and then just return this navigation controller. So we have a navigation controller available now. Let's use that to set it as the root view controller of the window. Let's call the navigation controller. So that's also done now. So this needs to be instantiated. It's also done. Now let's load our view controller to this navigation controller. So for that, let's call the storyboard instance. My storyboard is main, so use that storyboard name, pass nothing here, and once that storyboard instance is available, you can instantiate a view controller available within that view storyboard. So we need an identifier. So let's go back to the storyboard. This is my view controller. Let me just rename some of the stuff here. Let me call this as to-dos view controller. So that's my to-dos view controller, and let me rename it here as well. And once that's done, I also add a storyboard identifier called to-dos view controller, which I can use here. So this will instantiate my to-dos view controller. And now let's set the navigation controllers child view controllers. So that's my to-dos view controller. So let's see what has happened now. I'm creating an instance of ViewModel. So it should be done. And then instantiating the to-dos view controller using the storyboard, and then adding a navigation and associating that navigation view controller as the root view controller of my window. So let's see whether this will launch my still have some errors. Okay, we have an extension. Okay, so that should resolve it. So basically we moved the code outside of regular instantiation which is being done. So you can see that now I have loaded my to-dos view controller from the app delegate. So this is where the project's entry point will start, where I have the first view controller being loaded from this place. So now, as we know that this is where everything has to start, let's create a coordinator where you can pass all of this. So let's create a module, or even before that, yeah, let's create a coordinator. Let me just organize things. So first coordinator, let's call it as the app coordinator, because that is where everything starts from the app delegate. So that, let me call it as app coordinator. So this is just the basic of how we are going to proceed with it. So that's done now. I have an app coordinator available, and all that I need to do is move those logic from app delegate, where I was setting these things. Let's move it to my app coordinator. So I have an init where I will pass the window. So for UI window, we need to import UI kit. Maybe this is the only place outside of a view controller where we might have to use a window or UI kit. Hopefully that's the intention. And also let's have a Windows instance created. Let's call and receive the parameter window, and we pretty much have okay, we don't have the navigation. Let's move that as well. So we have the navigation view controller, navigation controller, everything is moved to this place now. And as a basic, or as a structure, normally for a coordinator, it's always followed to have a function named start, which will launch your required view controller. So in this case, let's move this part out to the start function. So this is just a convention being followed. So let's keep a comment there. This is where view controller is instantiated and pushed to the root view controller or something. So some comment there just to keep things in context. So this is just start will just call this and then push that view controller. So let's go back to our app delegate, and then let's just do the required instantiations here. Let's call the app coordinator here. Instance will ask for a window, so that's passed now. And let's just call app coordinator dot, okay, still some errors. Let's go back. Okay, this is optional type. and then app coordinator, just call the start function. So we have moved our code now to the coordinator, so which will actually now launch the screen. So we have successfully moved the logic for navigation outside of anything. So this will make more sense when we have multiple view controllers available. So let's run this and see whether things are working as expected. So we still have everything working. Nothing is broken. Okay, so that's also working. So things have not broken yet. So this is kind of the refactoring which is done right now, where we have the app coordinator is created where the initial launch is being done. So this can ideally become a case where you have to launch, let's say you validate a user initially before sending him to a, let's say, to-dos view. Then this is the place where this has to happen. Like, app coordinator will decide where to navigate the user based on the use case. So that's something interesting which we can take up in the future tutorial, where we'll move to the next level of coordinators. So this is basic stuff right now. I'll add some more stuff here to actually show you how we can have multiple view controllers loaded. So first thing is I want to have a new screen launched from here. Let's say if after launching this screen, I need to navigate to, let's say, a create new to do item, then we can do that. So as a first thing, let me just rework on this view, create one more view controller, and let's move these to this view controller, create to do, just calling it create to do, and I have this field entry, then I have this add button. Let's expand it a little. So, and one other thing I can now add is picker view. So if I add a picker view, let's say, as one of the options, because I can have now a personal or a work related to do. So let's add a picker view for that. Let me add this inside a stack view, just broken everything. Let's revisit. Okay, that looks fine now. Constraint on the left side. That's broken. And let's keep a default width for everything. Now that looks to be okay. Yeah, so we have a pretty looking view now. So So let's start working on it. Maybe I'll just keep it as fill proportionally. That will not make sense. Okay, that makes sense. Okay, so we have the to do. And let's start adding the outlets. Before that, let's create a view controller for this one. So this is my view controller, create to do view controller. I'll add that. Let me just move everything to a group, view controllers. To do controller goes in there. I'll create one more called create to do. UI view controller, create to do view controller, type Swift. That's done. Now let's get rid of what is not needed. That's it. I have create to do view controller, which I can now associate with the storyboard view controller. And let's also add a storyboard ID. So that's also done. Now let me add the outlets. That's my picker view. Let's call it type picker view. Added that. Then my text field, new to do, and finally the button add to do. So we will use RxSwift extensively here. Let's import that. So I have these things available now. Let me bind the picker view. Firstly, for that, let me create an observable. Dot create the elements. We call it personal and work. 2 items for that observable, and then bind it with my observable type, which is my picker view type. So it has to be associated with item titles. And let's create the required functions there. So for that, so that's the binding. That creates the binding, and then I need to just have item need to dispose bag. Let's create that. If you're wondering what this dispose bag is, then you might have to check back on some of the earlier tutorials where it's being used. So I have the dispose bag ready, and need to have a return type. So let's return a string type of item. So that's the selected item. So this is the binding done on the picker view. Let's also add the picker view type selection, where I can have the model selected, just similar to how we have the table view binding model selected. In this case, mine is a string type, which I can now bind with the view model. So this is where we can start using view models for this particular case. But before that, we have to create a view model for our to do create view controller. So let's go create that. Before that, again, some more cleanup. Where let me just create view model folder where I can move all this. This is my view model, only view model which I created, where everything is available. So that's my view model. Let me just do a little bit of housekeeping before I start it. So I need the to-do menu altogether. We can just move it. Let's call it to-do menu item view model. Whole things comes here. Don't need Swift JSON there, or maybe even data sources. So this is here now. I can get rid of this much. Then maybe I can create a section view model. So I have heard that the Swift compiler slows down whenever we have so many files created for everything. So as far as possible, it will be easier if you are keeping everything within a single file, which will make it easy for the compiler to handle things. So because I had faced an issue where in a project where I had so many files, even for one protocol, I had a file which created such a impact on compilation. So one of the things mentioned there was to keep those things within the same file closer to the requirement or the wherever it is being used. So that can be done to improve upon compilation. Let's move this to do item view model now. So we have this much bit for that. So let's also take out the dependencies required. Guess that will do. Now I guess we are pretty much good to go, where we have to do view delegate. We have Realm Swift import here, which we can move a bit closer. So that's it. We have all the view models in place now. Let's create our new view model for create to do. Let's create a file, create to do view model. So this is directly mapping with the create to do view controller. And let's grab some of the things which are already there in to do view model, which has to be here now. So we have the to do view model has on add item. This needs to be a product move part of this create now, because we are moving creation to this layer. So let's call it create to do view delegate, where we will only have this, and let's get rid of the other one on add. And then let's grab the whole function out, where I had it here. Let's let's remove it from this one because we don't need it anymore here. And then let's create an extension to this. And then have that function here now. So this function will require us to have something called as a new to do item property, which we have to again grab from the other place. New to do item now has to be part of create new. Let's move it there. Protocol, let's call it create to do view presentable. Don't need the search here. And then remove it from here and introduce here. So that's now available in this file, and we need to inject the database through the init. So let's call it database. Database instance is now available in this class as well. We need to init it from the outside, so we have done some cleanup on this side now. So with this cleanup, okay, so even we can use it in this way. We need not inject, but it's always good to inject your let's keep that injected, because that's always good to have the services or anything injected from outside to this, so it becomes more testable. So let's keep it that way. And I guess we are pretty much okay with this one, where we don't need to extract out anything more. So this is now good. Let's go back to our view controller, where we need to remove the feature from this view controller. We don't need these two anymore. So let's remove those dependencies of text field new item and touch up inside function. Then get rid of these two. So that in turn modified our. So let's go back to the view controller, to this view controller. We had this text field new item. Let's get rid of that and the related function. So we had this function here on add item. We need to move this to our view controller now. So let's go back there. So this is no more needed. So we can always introduce this by having a tap rx introduced here, but then add to do .rx.tap, then bind that to the function. So our text field is becoming this now, where we are trying to see whether it is not empty or not. And now we don't have a view model yet. Let's create that. And even this creation of view model, adding this dependency, can come from outside. Let's see when we can do that, when we are almost there with our coordinators. create to do view model, and it is asking for this database. So let's give it that singleton. So that's being passed now. We have the view model now available. So I guess let's add the dispose bag as well. Let's compile it once and see. Needs a self. It is within a closure now, so that should solve it. Okay. Can use that there. Okay, that's fine. So that's pretty much the to do the model does not conform, so it still has some property. It still has this new to do. Get rid of that. So all the dependencies are removed now, and then it is being added to this one. So we have the tab handle, we are getting this value, and now the only thing we need to do is to bind this. Let's do that. So let's go back to our create to do controller. Needs a binding with the field of type string. Let's go back to our to do view controller, add a field called to do item type, and keep it as a variable string. Okay, it needs imports. Still okay. Now it should be fine. So it's not implementing the delegate. Let's instantiate it with maybe time being a string value, personal. So that's it. We have this variable property available now. So once we have it bound with the observable variable type, let's say, okay, it is accepting an array of string. We have to modify it here. And then so now if you have the binding done, it can be bound with a variable string type. So we have the view model, and can bind it with the to do item type. So I guess still we need to and then dispose it using the dispose bag. Let's break it down properly. So on model selected, bind it to the view model property called to do item type. So we need to see whether we are getting it here. I can always check it by creating an observable, and then let's subscribe and see for the value. It's an array. Items is coming back. We don't have a dispose back. So let's print and see whether we are receiving the subscribed items. So selected, type received. Okay, so now let's look at the code again. We have the observable created to bind with the picker view to bind the items title, which will return an item, and on the to do item type, on selected, we are listening to the selected item and then subscribing that on the view model side. So that's it's a binding here with the picker view, and on the tap we have on add to do item, which will go to the view model. So one of the changes that we need to do here is we are not sending the type. Okay, it has to be small case. Let's keep that consistent. It's good to have a enum here. Let me work on that later, but then it's good to have an enum there where you can identify the type and bind that enum value to the picker view. So initially we had it as always sending personal, but now we have an option with the value of the to do item type, which will always have a value now. To do item type dot value, we can always send the first item. So let's get that. To do type if there is no to do type, we can always return. Let's say we say to do type is not set. So I guess can use that to do type here value, and we might have to extend this. Okay, it's already there. So let's create an update. We'll accept the to do type and create the corresponding realm object. So that part is already there. So let's see what's going on. We don't have yet something which will launch this, which we can always modify our coordinator and see for the changes. So let's go back to our coordinator, and to start, let's have a couple of functions. One function being launch to-dos, where it just does this. Just move that code to a function which will make sense. So let's comment it, launch to-dos screen. That's it. And let's also have one function, launch create to do. Again, just it will just do the same stuff, but it will create the instantiate the create to do ViewController. So just need to check the create to do view controller. I guess that's the name being given in the identifier. Let's go back and see, or else we can even write to. Okay, that's it. So we have the create to do view controller. So on start we can choose to now, let's say, launch the app using launch create to do. So let's see whether now instead of the to do screen, the to do create to do's launches. So as you can start seeing the benefits. You are actually decoupling the logic outside of. Okay, as you can see, it's working now. It's bound this nicely, and you have a way of launching your screens externally without even using any view controllers. It's all extracted out or encapsulated. So now let's see, it's working. So you can see that even this selection part is received in the view model. So even that binding is being done nicely now. So let's create something out, new sample coordinator, and then add the item. We won't see the result yet because we don't have the code bit yet, but we can always go and see it because it's persisted. We can launch it again using launch to do's. And you see that it's being persisted, and surprisingly it's come under new sample code. I don't remember whether it was under what was the last selection done there. Let me just do that once more. So the start, launch create to do. So let me choose work and then work related item, create it, go back. It's not a good way, but we will come to a state where we can start using it extensively, where child coordinators can be added and all that thing. So let's just see what's going on now. Okay, so it pretty much worked here. You can see that the work has work related item now, so that's also added. Everything is working perfectly with the coordinator, the base app coordinator added. So I guess at least we have something to decouple the features using coordinators now, where navigation is being abstracted out and being used as coordinators. At least we have started with app coordinators. We will start looking at the coordinators in more depth in this coming tutorials, where we will have child coordinators defined, and then we can define navigation from and push or pop anything using app coordinators. So hope you enjoyed this episode. Hope to see you soon with 2 or 3 more episodes which will cover all the things required for the coordinator side. Until then, take care and have a happy learning. Bye.